The banks of the Siliwung River have seen centuries of history flow by. On a quiet night in a traditional Betawi village, life slows down. Look closely at the intricate carvings and white stairs of a wooden stilt house like this one, and you can almost hear the past. During the day, these streets are alive. Towering figures with brightly painted faces, known as ondel-ondel, dominate the festivals, bringing a burst of color and energy that defines Jakarta's traditional art. But tonight, the festivals are over. Inside one of those stilt houses, a grandmother named Mak Enchum sits quietly knitting a floral pillowcase. Nearby, her grandson Ujung is tucked into bed, wide awake, asking for his favorite bedtime story. This quiet exchange between a grandmother and her grandson is the primary way the local history of Jakarta survives. Long before history books or modern museums, the Betawi people preserved their identity in the dark, passing stories of local heroes from one generation to the next. Mak Enchum's story takes Ujang back in time, away from the modern city and deep into the colonial era of Old Batavia. Here, in a modest coastal village, lived a young man named Pitung. Pitung was the son of a simple farmer. Like many families in the region, their lives revolved around the soil. They spent their days wading through muddy fields, relying on water buffalo and grueling physical labor to grow enough crops to survive. But survival was incredibly difficult. The region was controlled by wealthy colonial landlords who exercised absolute authority over the local peasantry. They imposed massive taxes on the farmers, taking the majority of the harvest and leaving the workers with almost nothing. One day, this system crushed Pitung's family directly. Because they were late on a tax payment, a payment that was impossibly high to begin with, a landlord forcibly confiscated their farm. Pitung watched his father weep, their only source of livelihood completely wiped out. The local courts and colonial police offered no help to the poor. The villagers had no legal way to defend themselves against the elite. When the law only serves to extract wealth, people are pushed to the breaking point. The village desperately needed a protector. Pitung refused to accept his family's ruin. He turned to a local teacher and threw himself into the study of silat, the traditional martial art of the region. He spent years quietly mastering the fluid strikes and defensive blocks, preparing himself. Once his training was complete, Pitung went to work. Under the cover of darkness, he began creeping into the large, heavily guarded estates of the most ruthless landlords in Batavia. He didn't keep the spoils for himself. The next morning, impoverished families would wake up to find untraceable packages of rice and coins resting quietly on their doorsteps. It didn't take long for whispers to spread through the village. A few people caught glimpses of a familiar face in the shadows. They recognized the devout farmer's son, and almost overnight, Pitung became a revered local hero. As families shared the rice Pitung left behind, the shared secret created a new kind of bond. When the colonial guards came asking questions, the villagers suddenly found themselves unable to remember faces or names. By protecting the man who protected them, a community once paralyzed by fear began to act as a single, silent shield. The landlords were outraged. They immediately petitioned the colonial government, branding Pitung a dangerous criminal. In response, authorities placed a massive financial bounty on his head, offering a fortune to anyone who could bring him in. Entire regiments of heavily armed colonial soldiers were mobilized to hunt him down. To survive, Pitung relied on the people he had helped. He moved constantly, slipping through an underground network of civilian safe houses provided by loyal villagers. But the bounty proved too tempting for one person. An undercover spy discovered his location and tipped off the authorities. A massive military force surrounded the house in the dead of night. Pitung fought fiercely to protect the villagers hiding him, but the numbers were simply too great. He was eventually captured. Back in the wooden stilt house, Ujang looks up at his grandmother, tears in his eyes. He is confused and saddened. Why did the hero have to lose? Mak Enchum gently strokes his head and explains the truth about legends. She tells him that true courage is defined by the willingness to put yourself in danger to stand up for people who cannot protect themselves. Pitung's capture didn't end his story. It proved his devotion to his people. The next morning, the legend of Pitung leaves the quiet of the bedroom and enters the physical world of Jakarta. Muk and Chum takes Ujang to visit a local museum, displaying replicas of the traditional machetes and clothing Pitung wore. In the streets, theatrical troupes perform Lanang, acting out his raids against the colonial landlords to cheering crowds. They eventually reach the Marunda House, an old wooden structure that serves as a protected cultural heritage site. Locals believe this was one of Pitung's actual hideouts, and its preservation keeps his struggle visible in a rapidly changing city. Preserving these physical artifacts and continuing these artistic traditions embeds the history of anti-colonial resistance into Jakarta's modern identity. Before breakfast is even ready, Ujang is out in the yard, practicing stances and throwing playful punches at the air, trying to move just like his hero. He asks his grandmother to let him formally study Silat. He focuses on the discipline, the patience, and the internal bravery that allowed a simple farmer to stand up to an empire. Years later, the boy in the yard has become a man and a community leader. Every weekend, Ujang teaches Silat to the children in his neighborhood, and at the end of every class, he sits them down and retells the legend of Si Pitung. The legend endures through this cycle of teaching and retelling. When each new generation chooses to embody these values, the story remains a living, breathing part of the Betawi people.